I'm really glad that he finally changed the artwork back, because here we are. I know it's a bit late, a month late, but I kind of figured because he's been fiddling around with it for so long that I can just put it in whenever and it won't really matter. So, here we go. So, Kanye West review, So Help Me God, / SWISH, / Wave, / Life of Pablo. The title will probably change at some point in the near future because he's changing everything else. So, Kanye West is a rapper from Chicago and one of the most polarising musical figures of the 21st century. Love him or hate him, you can't deny that the man's one of the most talked about people in the music world. Anything he does generates a story which is either met with hostility or indifference. But lately his life has been revolving around the concept of celebrity, which is in part to do with his marriage to Kim Kardashian, but also his sudden interest in fashion. But this wasn't always the case. He came into the scene as a producer for Rockefeller, creating hit after hit, and then established himself as a rapper also with the album The College Dropout, a record that showed he not only was an exquisite producer with a good ear for samples, but also a great wordsmith who could be very witty when he wanted to be. Got a dark-skinned friend, look like Michael Jackson. Got a light-skinned friend, look like Michael Jackson. And after his soulful debut, which, let's be honest, proved that a rapper could talk about more than just ass and titties, and popularised the idea of using soul samples in hip-hop, he gave the genre a kick up the arse that it needed, and it was going through somewhat of a decline at the time, so it was much needed. Thanks, Kanye. Then comes Late Registration, an album chock-a-block full of other influences from the likes of classical music and baroque pop, which emerged into his style and made him a superstar around the world, not just in the US. Was there anywhere that wasn't playing Gold Digger? He then introduced electronic music into his third effort, Graduation, but a real seismic shift occurred after his mother died, and his fiancée dumped him within the same year. And during this time of mourning, he created 808s and Heartbreak, a really polarising record, and my favourite in his oeuvre. A record which featured no rapping. It turned a lot of people off, but it also introduced a new sound that ushered in a new generation of rappers such as Drake. But for me, this was the point when Kanye started swimming into the deep end, and ever since his records have become more and more incoherent and lyrically poor. It can also be seen more and more in how he presents himself publicly. It appears as if he's going to have a severe breakdown at any moment. He's gone from completely quiet on Twitter to never shutting up his inane ramblings. He's just become more and more delusional, and his critics have followed where he's gone. Many claim his next record that he released after 808s and Heartbreak, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, to be the high watermark of this century's hip-hop, but I genuinely believe it's a case of the Emperor not wearing any clothes. People acclaimed that record despite the fact that it was clearly flawed. Clearly! I sent this bitch a picture of my dick. Come on. Really? And then 2013's Jesus was critically acclaimed across the board, and sonically, yeah, it was interesting in places, though it did rip off the likes of Death Grips. But my lord, some of the bars on that record were poor indeed, and in typical Kanye fashion of late, made you roll your eyes several times in quick succession. But now, we have a new record. Many have asked for the old Kanye to return to create soulful music with great lyrics, and we got flashes of it on Yeezus with the track Bound 2, but I was thinking the whole time, will this record even deliver? We've been waiting nearly 3 years for this. First he said it would be out the year after Yeezus, then his newfound interest in being a fashion designer took off, and he decided to work on that for a while. And after initially announcing that the record would be called So Help Me God, a, interesting title, he also saying that it would be a gospel album, which, would be a welcome departure, and would feature several collaborations with Sir Paul McCartney, with the tracks Only One, All Day, and 5-4 Seconds featuring Rihanna, which I wish I could forget about. But since then, we've had 3 more album titles. He changed it shortly afterwards to SWISH, which, by the way, is an awful title for an album. Then about 3 weeks before the release, which was announced at some point in January, he changed the title to Waves. Okay. And then a couple of days before the release, he yet again changed it to his final title, The Life of Pablo. Well, I mean, I don't know if it is even going to be his final title. He then changed the album's artwork shortly afterwards, but then it was changed again to a really crass cover featuring his wife's arse on show that was just gratuitous and self-absorbed and... Now, whether you see this all as just very messy and indecisive or not, it is excellent marketing regardless. Whether it's intentional or otherwise, every time anything was changed, everyone heard about it, whether they wanted to or not is a different matter. But they heard about it on every music blog, whether it be Enemy or Pitchfork. Then there was the decision to never release the album for purchase, and for it to be a Tidal Stream exclusive, which in turn brought Tidal more people to download the app, as they couldn't access it anywhere else. I mean, the Pirate Bay says otherwise, but... It's been an excellent piece of marketing on his part. Then you obviously have the Twitter rants, the claims of crippling financial debt, and this... I did wonder, like many others, why you'd ask Mark Zuckerberg anything on the one place he wouldn't be. And now he's announced he's releasing another record this summer, along with a third outing in 2016 also. So I may be back right here in a few months. But anyway, we've spoken about all the bullshit surrounding the release, but is it any good, I hear you ask? Well, the record opens up with the glorious track Ultralight Beam, a song which was originally left off the original Tracklist that Kanye published. It really makes me consider going to church. It's that powerful. It begins with a sample of a little girl talking about how, you know, Jesus is great and God's great and, you know, piss off Satan, and it's followed by a reverse keyboard which is joined by some heavenly vocals, and then Kanye comes in, and it actually sounds like the artist he wants you to believe he is, and for a brief moment, he can actually sing. There is surprisingly no auto-tune on this track. The lyrics talk about God saving us, making life better for us all, yada 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 yada. The guest vocals are where this track really astonishes. The lead vocals from Kelly Price are wonderful, and the Chance the Rapper verse is just, it's excellent. And at times, really funny. Everything about this track is excellent. The trumpet towards the end and the gospel choir in particular. The track feels so organic and it doesn't feel like there's any artifice in there. It feels so natural and pure. And I was just so looking forward to the rest of the record from this point in. And pretty much from this point onwards, it takes a straight nosedive remarkably quickly and it never quite recovers. Yeah, so second track, Father Stretch My Hands Part 1, has an interesting and soulful introduction. It's intruded with this low-end bass. Then Kid Cudi comes in with his auto-tune, followed by Kanye, using the same vocal correction device he's become too attached to. It's good. And then that verse comes in. I just fucked this model. She just bleached her asshole. If I get bleach on my t-shirt, I'ma feel like an asshole. Is there much point carrying on this review? This lyrical abomination then trans into part 2, a banger which features no particular interest. No particular interest. I liked their last mixtape, it was good. We have in here a sample of the best song that Future has never done by an artist called Designer. Everyone thought that it was Future up until they read the credits, but his track Panda is sampled, which is okay. Yet it ends with some interesting vocoder vocals and the same sample which introduced the track in the first part. So it's not totally without merit, but... Then in the next track, Famous, we have the obligatory Rihanna feature, and if I'm honest, Rihanna always kills a track which she's on, and no, I don't mean that in a positive way. Again, we have the eye rolling on this track where Kanye takes credit for Taylor Swift's success. I feel like me and Taylor might still have sex, why? I made that bitch famous! Which she responded to gracefully in a Grammy acceptance speech, which, you know, kudos to her. She really handled that with grace. It's times like this, I wonder how Kanye's mother would feel if she heard him say such hideously misogynist remarks. To be honest, I think she might clip him round the ear. Then he goes on to essentially suggest that anyone who gets dick from Kanye West is essentially a better person because the almighty deity that is Kanye West bestowed glory upon them through his majestic, godly love juice. You have a wife and kids, grow the fuck up, seriously. Stop being so fucking immature. Although I do like the chopped up Sister Nancy sample. Then we have Feedback, which is the first song which is vaguely consistent since Ultralight Beam. It had an interesting sound which harps back to Yeezus, but also reminded me a little bit of The Prodigy. Anyone else? Yet again, Kanye talking about his ego and asks, name one genius that ain't crazy. Yeah. And then he talks about people bashing him, including no pussy getting bloggers. Yeah, at least my child isn't an intercardinal direction. Burn. Then we have the interlude, Lowlights, which is just a pretentious piece of waffle. Which takes us into the next track, Highlights, which features Young Thug, a rapper I have a pretty strong disdain for. He really ruined that Jamie XX track last year. But again, in this track, Kanye's trying hard, really hard, to disappoint me, and he's doing an excellent job. Wishing that his dick had GoPro so he can play that shit back in slow-mo. It started to remind me a little bit of Michael Jackson after that, which showed promise. Then that rap verse comes in. Are you seriously going to talk about the guy who fucked your wife, who made her famous through a sex tape, and suggesting that you're better than him because you're rich? Oh, track 8, Freestyle 4. We have this really big build-up with these dark strings, followed by a flow which reminds me a bit of Davy Diggs from Clipping, but then all goodwill goes out the window when it just becomes ridiculous. What if we fuck right now? What if I'm right in the middle of this fucking table? Refer back to what I said in Famous. In fact, every track so far, with the exception to Ultralight Beam and that Lowlights pish, has had at least one section about fucking random women who are only there for your own sexual gratification. All hail King Kanye! The I Love Kanye interlude is kind of humorous, but ultimately when the record's been this poor up until this point, anything remotely resembling merit will sound masterful. All it made me think of was, yeah, I do miss the old Kanye. He wouldn't be talking about fucking a model with a bleached asshole. Then we have Waves. Thanks, Chance the Rapper, for making Kanye put this on his album. The track is the first song which doesn't feature rapping, and I guess this is some kind of look back to 808s and Heartbreak. There's elements of each of his records on this album, and that would be fine, except the song is simply hackneyed and embarrassing. I mean, it seems so out of place on this album. When crassness and sentimentality coexist, it's often a very jarring experience. When you compare the songwriting here to the songwriting found in 808s and Heartbreak, which was clever, it was witty, which displayed such great lyrical prowess. When compared to here, the level isn't even adolescent, it's prepubescent. Sun don't shine in the shade, bird can't fly in a cage. Even when somebody goes away, the feelings don't really go away. Honestly, the insight which is showcased here seems to belong to a 10-year-old boy who's just had his first crush. It is so banal. I mean, the whole thing is just really quite dreadful. And Kanye's singing is also pretty poor here too. Not to kick him while he's down, but yeah, you're doing a great job so far. Good job. But the next track is where things really pick up. Fuck My Life is the first track on this record which appears to show some signs of genuine inner torment. We hear Kanye go on about how hard his life is all the bloody time, yet he never addresses it in a way which demonstrates he has any recognisable human emotions. But this track is exactly what I've been waiting for. It shows how vulnerable he can be, a side which he showed us, and what some would consider too much of, in the 808s and Heartbreak album, which was what really made me fall in love with that record. There wasn't anything vacuous about it. It felt genuine and and heartfelt and tactile. It was something which felt real. Hardly anything on this album feels real. There's a really interesting lo-fi sound back in Kanye, who sounds a bit depressed, to be honest, and saying he'll leave everything for his family, who are the most important thing to him, and you wouldn't think it listening to this album, but perhaps that's just a side to his personality which he's trying to push away. And if so, this album is slightly more coherent than I first thought. Though it's incoherence, as it's about someone who doesn't have a grip on their life, and it's completely chaotic as a result. Then that Weekend feature. My lord! It sounds so perfect with this track. Then there's that excellent off-kilter beat at the end, which does demonstrate that Kanye can be the artist which he thinks that he is. I really love this track. I think it's incredibly moody and by quite some way one of my favourites on the record. Then we go from one great song to another, Real Friends, which was previously released, and my god, this track is excellent! The beat is beautiful, and Kanye again sounds vulnerable, asking himself whether any of his friends are really genuine, and he always seems to lose touch with them. How they only talk to him to ask him about a favour, how he's just as bad, never having time for them. Also talking about his cousin who stole his laptop and asked him to spend several $1,000s to get it back from him. Wondering if anyone, even his family, are genuine with him. And that chorus from Ty Dolla $ign is gorgeous, and the dulcet tones of that coda are simply breathtaking. It really hit home as someone who fails to keep in touch with people from my past, some of whom have children now and or are married. I really wish Kanye would continue to release music like this, because it's always great to hear something vulnerable from him. I know he likes to big himself up as some kind of no-nonsense robot, but I want to see more smiles, more tears. Less blue steel, please, you robot. Then we have Wolves, which is somewhat difficult to talk about because he's changed the track twice already. Originally it had Vic Mensa and Sia. Then when this was released, they had been omitted completely. Then Kanye stated on social media that he was going to fix it, and recently arrived with Vic Mensa and Sia reinstated, with the Frank Ocean feature receiving its own track. However, now he said that another version may appear with Bjork and Drake featured, in no way taking cues from Death Grips. Secret's safe with me. Really though, when an album's released, that's it. You don't change it. If you weren't happy with it in the first place, you shouldn't put it out for consumers to digest. But either way, the track has a very moody selection of production, but the lyrics, like the other tracks, just completely ruin the song. They're not offensively moronic, though, so it makes for a nice departure. Yet he starts to compare himself and Kim to Mary and Joseph, and ponders the question of what would happen if Mary and Joseph met in a club with no love. Plus that line about someone took a sandwich from your fridge. What? The Sia feature sounds okay. It's essentially the same as the introduction, same lyrics anyway, where Kanye West is addressing the issue of what I've been saying all this time. What would his mother think of his behaviour? If your mama knew how, you're too wild, you're too wild, you're too wild, blah 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 blah. The Frank Ocean conclusion is slightly satisfying. It's good to see that he hasn't died, and is indeed recording. When are we getting that album, Frank? Seriously, it's been nearly 4 years. Don't pull a detox on us. I mean, for the love of God. Well, let's move on. The Silver Surfer Intermission is just unnecessary, really. I mean, 30 Hours has a good Arthur Russell sample and a nice beat with some good lyrics, but the latter portion is just overindulgent and should have been left on the cutting room floor. No one listens to an album and thinks, ooh, I'd really like to hear the performer's phone go off whilst recording and then having a conversation. Yeah, I'm just recording a track. Yeah. No More Parties in LA has got some great production from Madlib, and Kendrick brings a couple of good bars, and Kanye sounds great on it. It's a good track, but after the slew of deluge that you've had to wade through, it just came far too late. Sorry. And the final two tracks, okay, I'm surprised that Facts is on the album because the lyrics are just delusional beyond belief. And really, who cares that he sold 1 million copies of Kimoji? I didn't see you bragging about how many copies Kim's sex tape sold. The beat is better on here than the previous mix, but ultimately it's oral excrement. And Fade, this track is so anticlimactic and doesn't appear to feature Kanye at all. It's just some odd sub-house fodder, which ends far too abruptly. I mean, Wolves would have been a much better closer despite my reservations with it, but whatever. This album's so erratic, it's worrying. You could look at it as showing us the inner psyche of Kanye. There's the sonic equivalency of being bipolar. Well, that would be looking for things which aren't there, because like with his other records since 808, as I said before, the Emperor has no clothes. It appears Kanye can release a collection of cat sounds and it would still get critical acclaim, although Run the Jewels did that and that got quite a lot of plaudits. Although that was pretty creative. However, at this point, I think the artifice is starting to fall away and everyone is beginning to see what really lies behind the mask, and really, it's not particularly pleasant. Kanye said that he is going to keep changing the album until he's happy with it, stating that it's a living, breathing, changing creative expression, which is the most Kanye thing that Kanye could possibly say. The man's just a walking joke with pretensions that go beyond any human's capacity. Which, I must admit, that alone is quite admirable in a weird way. But if this record's taught us anything, it's that Kanye West is not a genius and is not the best thing since Disney and doesn't just make dope shit. He's just a very flawed man who can write a catchy track every now and again and nothing more. Or at least that's what he's become. His self-proclaimed darkness he uses as a veil for himself is just quite frankly laughable. And he seems to think that he's this sex-craved, depraved maniac just who's such a tortured soul a la Christian Grey, when really he's more Christian Dior, except without the skill. Whom he referenced on Stronger from his album Graduation. I really wish I was listening to that. Nothing about this album is deep or raises interesting points, with the exception to Real Friends, really. I'm giving this a 5 out of 10. I think this is quite possibly his worst album. But what do you think of it? Let me know in the comments. I'm going to go do something more productive than listen to Kanye waffle on about getting pussy. So, yeah. See ya.